I don't really give a shit if they throw gaming away on fucking woke shit or whatever other fucking stupid shit, because gaming is just, it just sucks now anyway. It really doesn't matter. Any good game came out 20, years ago, 15 fucking years ago, whatever. So they can just throw the shit all away. It doesn't fucking matter. But, you know, this one's be a little bit more of a pure stream of consciousness. Although I did want to mention something that I meant to talk about in the other video, one of the last ones, where I was talking about level design and lighting and the importance of texture and light selection, whatever, was vertex weighting. I'm not sure if there's really a term for it, but one of the ways that older games, like in the PS2 era especially, could get really good lighting um, without really having to bake light maps or like whatever, was to exploit the gouraud shading that a lot of games had back then. And basically what you could do is at each vertex essentially choose the light intensity at that vertex. It's basically just multiplying the the texture by the gradient of the shading of that. And like the cheapest operation you can possibly do pretty much would be why early games like Nintendo 64 3D shit would have a lot of stuff where different parts of the model didn't even have a texture. It was just like a solid color, because at that point all you're doing is just saying for each vertex, here's the color of this vertex, and you don't even need interpolation at that point. And it's extremely fast, one of the fastest things. You're basically just saying, all right, when it's drawn on the screen, every part that's between these vertices, basically you're just doing like a solid color in there. But when you get gouraud shading involved, all gouraud shading does is sample light intensity at each vertex and then linearly interpolate the value between there across the surface of the polygon. And what that means is you can selectively control that. And you don't even really need the lighting part of that. The lighting is just a hint for how it'll do that. But what you can do is essentially have like a full bright level, right? Basically no lighting. And then you have your texture maps on it, and then at particular vertices you can be like, okay, this one kind of just make it darker here. And because it linearly interpolates between vertices, if you pick the right vertices and if you have the right tessellation, you can basically simulate shadows, or even kind of like an ambient occlusion effect without really doing a light calculation at all. And, it might not necessarily be that much faster than a pre-computed light map, and it won't look as good most of the time. But the big issue, and why this was used so much on like PS2 era games, is because of the RAM limitations. Because the PS2 and other consoles of that era had pretty low system RAM and low VRAM. And doing this is this kind of method is doesn't cost anything additional than just doing it regular, just texture mapping the scene. And you can see it a lot in games like Hitman 2 Silent Assassin, where there's a lot of shadows that are very clearly just, you can actually see the interpolation, kind of like mock bands, they call them, uh, effects from the linear interpolation between the vertices. You can even basically infer the underlying topology of the mesh, from the shadows whenever they do this kind of trick. But yeah, Hitman 2 Silent Assassin, I thought of it again, and I meant to mention the other one because I was watching different game related, videos, and one of the videos showed was one of the older Tomb Raider games that it looked like it was a PS2 era game. And it was very clearly doing a trick like that. And I always love shit like that. Just some little trick that it adds so much to the scene. And even if it didn't like hypothetically look as good as a kind of proper light map, even if you can tell what they're doing, like that's also like part of what makes it cool, right? Like, being a level designer by hobby for over 20 years, I get pretty good at being able to tell how level designers in a game pulled off certain stuff. Some of them are more obvious than others, but there's certain things that unless you do it yourself, you might not even notice kind of how they pulled it off. It's sort of like practical effects in old movies. It's like you might be able to tell how they did it, but that's also part of the kind of magic of it, right? Um, or at least if you're like me and you're more analytical. Like when I was a kid and I liked pro wrestling, they had documentaries online about how, or not online, God, on TV about how the wrestlers fake this and that, and like the little inside tricks or like whatever they do. I remember when I saw documentaries like that as a kid, that like I liked wrestling, but like that was the part where I like really fell in love with it, right? Um, it didn't ruin wrestling. It didn't make me think, oh no, it's fake. It just made me like it more. I just thought it was cool to know how it worked. I always used to watch all the special making of features on DVDs and shit like that. Um, Teaching myself music theory made me like music more, right? Because like I started to be able to hear how they did this and that, especially if you've like played guitar before. I mean, if you listen to music like I do, so you have the actual practical experience. You start to be able to figure out how they did this or that kind of sound or like whatever. And for me anyway, stuff like that just makes me like it more. I like being able to tell how they did it, and making my own levels forever um, really helps you be able to see it in others, level designs. So I've actually been working on a level for like on and off for a couple weeks now, maybe. I'm not trying to make anything exactly, but I'm just doing whatever feels right in the moment. Uh, Mostly I'll just, if I'm sitting there listening to a video, uh, I'll just have Hammer, the editor for Source Engine, Source 1, like Half-Life 2 era. I'll have it open and I'm just sitting there just kind of making whatever I feel like making while I'm listening to videos or whatever the fuck else. And it's just, something I do to pass time, partly because I enjoy it, partly because it's a distraction, partly because it's nostalgic, because with Half-Life 2, I've been doing it since the day the game was brand new, right? Like September, whatever, 2004. So I've been modding the game since it came out. And that actually ties into a comment I made on a video I saw. I think it was uploaded in the last day or so, but the thing was about Oblivion. And they were talking about mods and how, you know, Bethesda ruined modding with, however they fucked it up now. And so I made that point. It's like Valve did the same shit. Instead of monetizing it, really, though, what they did was they broke mods with the 2013 steampipe update. And the way I said it was, you know, with the 2013 steampipe update, Valve basically destroyed like 99% of like the mod ecosystem. Because most of the mods were really early on of the game's release. And the steampipe update changed how the game handles the game files and a lot of other stuff. So now there's mods that to this day permanently pretty much just don't work. So like, and one mod I mentioned was, anybody remember Plan of Attack? That was a really early multiplayer Half-Life 2 mod. Kind of like a military sort of, multiplayer Half-Life 2 mod that I remember playing it a ton between like 2005 and 2006 particularly. I made custom levels for it and everything. What's weird though is whenever I go try to download the old versions of it, well, first of all, they're pretty well broken. Just because, like I said, the assets don't work correctly because it was designed for a different way of it handling shit. But none of the maps ever look exactly how I remember. So, I mean, I must have showed up to that mod like really fucking early. I don't think any of the full releases are really the ones that I actually played the most. And then trying to find shit is a disaster because search engines are made shit on purpose, just so you, like, on purpose, can't find anything. And then most of the stuff is so old that people say, oh, it's on the internet forever. No, it isn't. Dude, most of the shit I remember from the past, I even have bookmarks of because I've saved bookmarks for over 10 years. Most of that shit doesn't exist anymore. And a lot of times you can't even find a Wayback Archive. So it's possible that the version of Plan of Attack I remember is just gone forever. But there's shit like that. Mods like that. That was tons of shit like that back in the day, and they're just all broken now. Like the OG versions of S-Mod don't work anymore. And I remember when that change first took place and broke S-Mod. There's newer versions of S-Mod now that work with how it works nowadays, but they're not the same. Everything is just so different now, and shit always changes for the worst. Like I mentioned in the other video, it's not necessarily a nostalgia thing. Anybody can see it. Everything is objectively worse as time goes on. And oh, they've been saying that for 1,000 years and blah blah. Okay, well, it was true when they said it then too, right? Just because they said it before doesn't mean it's not valid now, right? Because that's all that ever happens. And it's like, holy fuck, like I can't even have fucking video games as a way to not have to fucking think about anything. Just so fucking, just get so fucking tired of everything. Like I've been watching videos on Saints Row. That was another one. I played Saints Row on the original Xbox, or the Xbox 360, like from just about the day it came out, and all the way back in 2006, I fucking 15-year-old me emailed Volition wanting to know when there would be a PC port, and they gave me some kind of runaround response, basically kind of like NDA, whatever. I mentioned that in the other video, but yeah, that was the thing. Like Saints Row 2 sucked, and I was sort of looking at their listings on GOG, and I forgot about that. Like Saints Row the Third had all that DLC bullshit. Like that's what games were trying to do so much back like 10 years ago. That's what really got me out of games. It's like they're just going to steal out half the game and try to sell it back to you, just to try to double their money like that. And then of course they buried themselves with their so-called woke, new whatever they were trying to do a couple years ago, and now that company's gone forever. So like now I guess I just never get to play the piece of shit on PC. Yeah, there's 360 emulators, but they don't necessarily work that well. And it's like, dude, would you just let me fucking have a video game, right? The thing is, like, the 360 of the time was essentially a mid-range gaming PC. So there's a few differences, like multi-core wasn't really there yet on PC, so it's tri-core processor, whatever the fuck it had. That was a little bit of an innovation, but it wasn't that much different. The Microsoft consoles have always been glorified computers. I mean, they're all computers, but you know what I'm saying. And I just don't see the excuses. And it's like, oh, the code is whatever. Then release the code and we'll do it ourselves, right? Give us the assets, give us the code, and we'll make our own PC port. I'm not smart enough to do that, but somebody is, right? And oh, it was not optimized. It was optimized for 360 and all that. Okay, well then let me have the PC version that runs like shit. Then at least I get to play the fucking video game. Can't run much more. Can't run much worse than this fucking new shit that looks terrible. And run, it's 10 frames per second, FPS interpolated, AI upscaled, and looks worse than a game from 10, 15 years ago. So what's the difference? I don't know, whatever. 15 minutes is up, so I'm just going to this video here.